to interrupt the various conversations going on in various parts of the council chamber, I'd like to formally open the planning committee meeting this morning, and first of all welcome members, officers and members of the public in the public gallery. You're very welcome, and I know we have 4 speakers on the first item, which we'll come to in a moment, but you're very welcome, and thank you for taking part in this very important process in determining planning applications that are presented before the committee. First of all, to members, I don't need to say this, but I'm going to anyway. Remember, please, when you speak, to make sure that your microphone is on. That helps. There we are. Also, can we move to declarations of interest? Are there any declarations of interest?
I don't know if it's a declaration of interest, Chair, but I am a member of Ansdell Parish Council, which the Worsley Road application has been through us. Just to put that on the record.
Go straight to Ian Curtis and just get clarification on that. Councillor Dixon?
No, Chairman, because Councillor Dixon isn't connected with the applicant, or indeed anybody other than the public authority that's made submissions on the application. That wouldn't be a declaration of interest.
Thank you for that. Thank you. No other declarations of interest? Thank you. Confirmation of minutes for the last meeting. All those in favour, can you please put your hands up? We're happy with that. Unanimous. Thank you. Thank you very much. Are there any substitute members?
No, Chairman, we've got a full house of committee
We've
today.
got a full house. There we are. I suppose we should say bingo, I suppose, but never mind, we won't. I'll resist. Now we move to decision items, and I want to go through the protocol here, because we've 4 items to deal with this morning, and what we do, which is what we're doing this morning, if there are speakers, quite thoughtfully and sensibly, we have that particular item dealt with first, so that people have the choice whether to stay for remaining items, but if they're here for a particular item, and item 3 in this particular case, then you won't be staying that long in the town hall unless it's by choice. So we will start with 3, and then we'll go to 1, 2 and 4 in that order. The protocol is fairly straightforward. But when we have speakers, we have a short presentation regarding the planning application given by a planning officer. After the short presentation, we will break for speakers, and speakers will make their contribution, and the protocol there will be explained by the Vice Chair, who will be in charge of that sector of the morning. And then we will return to the officer who will complete his presentation. When the presentation is completed, there will then be questions and a debate by the members, who will then determine the application. So I hope that's very, very clear. So the public platform is up here with your microphone, etc. And as I say, the Vice Chair will go through the protocol when we get to that stage. So I hope that's helped your understanding of how we work. So we're going to move to item 3 to begin with. And item 3 is regarding an extension at 8 Worsley Road, Lytham St Anne's. So I'm going to hand over now to Andrew Stell.
Thank you, Chairman. Good morning, everyone. My name is Andrew Stell. I'm the Development Manager at Fylde, so I lead the team that deals with planning applications, and I'm presenting this item and a number of others this morning. The application in question relates to property at number 8 Worsley Road in Lytham. So that's generally indicated by the circle on the screen. So we've got the golf course here, Lytham St Anne's Golf Course, Fairhaven Lake. and Worsley Road is in a residential area relatively close to Lytham St Anne's High. So it's a detached property. It's located at the corner of Worsley Road with Central Drive. It's in the settlement area. There are no other designations. There's no conservation areas, listed buildings or anything in the immediate vicinity. The scheme in front of us is for a two-storey extension to the rear, single-storey element on that, which connects to an outbuilding, and it has been revised since it was first submitted. I've got obviously the drawings, which I'll show you in a second. The local parish council, Ansell and Fairhaven Parish Council, have objected to the application, and that's why it's here today. Our committee procedures require that where there is an objection, it's in front of the committee, so that's why we're here. There have been some late observations which have been circulated around the members of the committee. They cover it's a further representation from one of the neighbours, which makes a number of points about the impact on their property and the impact on the street scene, which I will cover in the general presentation, but I've also responded to in that late observations document. So just looking at the scheme in a little more detail, this is if you look at the aerial image on the left, that is the property within the red box. As you see, it's a detached house. This is Worsley Road. That's Central Drive. So if you continue that way, that becomes the public footpath that wraps between Lytham St Anne's playing field and the golf course and extends onto Beauclerk Road, if you know the area. So that is a public footpath, a cycle route. So whilst it's a cul-de-sac for dwellings, it is relatively well used. Lytham St Anne's High is in that direction, and obviously you can see there are residential properties around. On the right-hand side, this shows the property. In this time, the red box is to highlight the area where the extensions are. So this is the original dwelling, so that's equivalent to that part of that area. And then the extensions are from the rear and extend up to the rear boundary of the property, with the first bit here being two-storey, and then it dropping down to a single-storey element here, which you'll see on the elevations in a sec. So looking at that in perhaps slightly more detail, I can, although that moving it does sometimes interrupt with the camera. That's obviously as far as it will go. So this image is the other way around to the previous one. So the original property, existing property, is this part here. So this is the ground floor extension. So you've got an 8-metre projection backwards at single storey, which then meets this extension here, which is a replacement for the garage and an outbuilding at the property. And that's up against the rear boundary of the property, which, because it's on a corner, forms a side boundary of its neighbour on Central Drive. The bottom image shows the first floor extension. So you've got a 4-metre projection above that from the original rear elevation of the property. So this purple line I've put on there is to indicate where the two-storey element of the original dwelling currently sits. So everything to the right is an extension, everything to the left isn't. Couple of 3D aerial images to try and give some context to what presumably we're going to hear from the speakers and what we need to look at in terms of planning impacts. So this is the property. So it's got this existing single-storey extension, existing garage, existing outbuilding. So the proposal is to extend that effectively extend that single-storey extension to meet a replacement structure for these garages and outbuildings, and then put a 2-storey extension on top. You can obviously see the arrangement for the neighbouring property here, number 6. There's another neighbour across here, and obviously others around. And this, again, for context, because I appreciate some of these are spinning around. This is the Central Drive that connects through to Beauclerk Road. That's looking at it the other way. So you can see the application property here, extension over this single-storey element, the neighbour and the other arrangements. Turning to some more traditional pictures, this is the property from the front, from Worsley Drive, number 6, number 8, and then this is the view from Central Drive. So this is the application property, and the extension comes into this area here, and then extends back to where, this is where the garage of it is that you've seen on the earlier images. Finally, getting down to some elevations. So this is the view that you would get at the top, is effectively the view that you would get from that bottom photograph I just showed you on the previous slide. So I've got the two-storey element here projecting from the back of the original property, which is probably where my pointer is now. So that's the 4-metre first floor projection, and then this is the single-storey projection that extends back to the back of the garden area of the property. This is looking at it from the other way, so this is looking from the neighbour at number 6. So you've got the two-storey extension and then the single-storey extension here. Finally, the front and the rear elevations. You've got this is from the front, very limited change here other than the garage which is set very well back, and then this is the rear. So this is the view that you would get from the Central Drive neighbour of the single-storey extension, two-storey extension, and then the remainder of the property that's currently in position behind that. And hopefully that's given you a bit of an understanding of what we're looking at, and at that point I'll break for the speakers, Chairman.
Thank you, Andrew. I'm going to hand over to the Vice Chair now.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Andrew. Good morning, everybody. I'm Gavin Harrison, Vice Chairman of the Planning Committee. Each speaker will have the same amount of time, so in fairness to everybody, each speaker will have 3 minutes. I shall time the 3 minutes and give you a sort of gentle nudge 10-15 seconds before the end of that. We will have a hard stop at the 3 minutes again, as I say, just out of fairness to everybody. The podium's here. I think the microphone works fairly easily. Just press the right-hand button when you're ready to speak. Press it again to cut it off. So without further ado, if I could invite the first speaker, who is Brenda Wildish. Brenda, if you'd like to come forward and...
That's very kind. Thank you very much. Thank you. Good morning, Mr. Chairman and committee. My strong objections include precedent and context. I appeal for common community and historical sense to be applied here, and I make 3 points. Firstly, I'm questioning what exactly has changed in planning law, guidance and advice since when in 2006 the application to replace a crumbling rear 1950s rack concrete flat roof with a pitch slate roof just 2 doors away was refused because the potential of rising a metre or so higher than the then existing near garage pitch was deemed too obtrusive and out of scale with respect to the neighbouring property. How is a double-storey extension 20 metres away on the other side of the objecting property now acceptable? Secondly, I'm setting Worsley Road into context, having known this well-loved house for the last 40 years. Built just under 100 years ago on the centuries-old crossing point of the roads running west between the farms and south to the shoreline, the former has become the council's designated pedestrian and cycle route to St Anne's. The latter remains a busy route for dog walkers to the lake. Both are constantly used to access the schools and shops. Number 8 is highly visible and with a familiar elevation along both. Number 8 and its neighbour were built in strict keeping with the red brick and render style of the then surrounding late Victorian and early Edwardian houses and primary school remaining proportionate to them, adding to the older cottages and 17th century farmhouses to create a strong character of the area that's remained intact for over 100 years and has become the village of Ansdell. number 8 remained with its first family for nearly 80 years until the early 2000s. It was then bought by a developer who profited by immediately selling it on to a local young family who altered and extended it to the maximum along its historical footprint. Since 2012, 3 successive families have taken it on, ostensibly as their forever home. Thirdly, number 8, currently listed on Rightmove as the most expensive property in Worsley Road, but with a warning sign that no family stays there for very long. By ignoring context, sadly it's become an object of vanity projects, pursued with the objective of short-term gain. Given the current proposal, the original owner would be in full agreement with King Charles when in 1984 he declared a similarly inappropriate extension to be a monstrous carbuncle on the face of a much-loved and elegant friend. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And that scarily was within 0.1 of a second, 3 minutes.
Beautifully timed. Do you want to turn this off?
I'm Lisa Skinner. Welcome, Chairman and committee members. I'm Lisa Skinner. Together with my husband Simon, we are here to protect number 6, Worsley Road, our property, and preserve neighborhood amenity. This is a very large extension. We are looking at a massive 4-meter deep by 5-meter wide first floor extension, standing at 7.9 meters high, sitting on a ground floor section projection of 13 meters, plus a further 4-meter high T-shaped wraparound back extension crammed into an already constrained space. The SPD explicitly warns that overlarge extensions, especially first floors, can dominate and have harmful effects. The amenity assessment on number 6 indicates that there is no loss of amenity. I disagree. There's been a complete omission of the first floor extension visibility from our habitual rooms. Facing the extension with a 7.9 high meter wall of building along nearly the entire length of our property, this will create severe outlook loss, totally dominated by the first floor extension from every window, oppressive and literally under the eaves. No skyline and overbearing. I currently enjoy natural daylight as skylight floods through all habitual rooms with clear visible sky above the existing pitched roof single-story extension. The officer states no loss of light, yet no consideration of daylight or technical assessment, equally important, which is the natural light provided by the skylight. Officers state there is no amenity harm from the 13-meter back extension because it's the same height as the outbuildings. The current extension is 6 meters in comparison, and there's a 3-meter garage and a flat roof extension at number 8. A very weak justification for the cumulative effect through a 13-meter extension connected to a 4-meter high back wall that encloses the existing space in a T shape and looms 1 meter over our garage visible from the garden. Weak justification for subordination, just roof ridge height below the host property. The officer states the extension will be subordinate and well balanced, despite acknowledging it has matching eaves height to the host property, an extensive footprint of a 13-meter ground floor extension. This conclusion lacks proper justification against SPD criteria. I would also question subordinate to host when first floor extension would dominate outlook from all ground floor side windows and gardens. Finally, I've been made party to the knowledge that Ansdell is imminently to become a conservation area. Paul McKim of Fylde Council has been working with the Civic Society very closely over the last month. I understand that property 2, 4, 6, 8, and 32 down Central Drive and on are all part of the conservation area. I respectfully request that you refuse this application based on the weak, incomplete justifications for granting. Thank you.
very much, Lisa. And if I could next call Carmel Keelty, please. Morning, Carmel. As with other speakers, I'll give you 3 minutes, I'll give you a 15-second warning. I think the microphone's still on, so
Okie
in your
dokie.
own good time.
Thank you very much. Good morning. My name is Carmel Keelty, and for 22 years my husband and I have lived in number 7 Worsley Road, directly opposite number 8 Worsley Road, the property seeking planning permission. We have happily raised 3 children here who have now left home. They frequently come back to visit and have often commented that nothing changes in Ansdell, a comforting thought when they all live in ever-changing big cities. Our living room looks out onto number 8, and we have always admired this handsome, beautifully proportioned house. The changing seasons are marked by the splendid foliage of the huge and magnificent copper beech tree in the front garden of said house. Number 8 Worsley Road has a hugely aesthetic influence in Ansdell and is known colloquially as the big house on the corner. Granting planning permission for a large and what we consider inappropriate extension on this already extremely large property would visually impact us. The garage is a distinctive design feature of this area and also acts as a visual separation point between properties when viewed from the street. Tearing this down to build some kind of a modern T-shaped wraparound block of building as a back extension cannot possibly be described as sympathetic to the character, design and building style of the area. This is a substantial 5-bedroom, 4-bathroom house already enlarged in 2004 by Wendy, our then neighbour, who sympathetically added a top-floor master ensuite and significantly expanded the existing single-storey pitched roof ground floor extension to accommodate an open-plan kitchen and dining area that looks out onto the garden and patio area. Ansdell is a very compact area, for want of a better description. Front and back gardens tend to be very small and houses have been built relatively close together. Our beautiful area is called Ansdell Village and does have a unique village feel for an area that is not rural. As far as we are aware, no large, modern, double-storey height extension connected to a wraparound back extension, such as the one proposed for this property, has ever been granted planning permission in Ansdell. We are extremely concerned that should planning permission be granted for this property, it would set a dangerous and negative precedent for more inappropriate and unnecessary extensions to be granted, thereby destroying the history, heritage and delightful aesthetic of Ansdell Village. Consequently, we are vehemently opposed to this planning application being granted. Thank you very much for your time. Thank you
very much indeed, Carmel. And the final speaker, could I call James Alderson, who is the agent of the applicant? Morning, James.
Good morning. Morning.
You'll have seen the proceedings.
Yeah.
3 minutes in,
Just set my little timer there.
15 seconds. I think the mic's still on for you.
Good morning. Morning. My name is James Alderson. I'm the agent acting on behalf of Mr. and Mrs. McLaughlin. We met the client 3 years ago at the property and they assessed the current condition. Basically, in a nutshell, the bedrooms are too small, there's no family bathroom, the kitchen was too small, the orientation of the design looked out over 6 Worsley, not the garden for the children. The client's got 2 young children, 2 boys, and they wanted to create additional bedroom space and additional living space downstairs. So we looked at extending the property. The house sits on a large plot, 7,000 square foot. Most of the buildings are to the southern part of the site, creating a large garden against Central Drive. The building has got beautiful brickwork, great features, lovely architectural details, overhanging eaves, which we will replicate in the new extension. It will blend in seamlessly with the existing building, all hipped roofs, bringing it off the boundary line, reducing the impact on the neighbours. We're We put an original submission in, as we mentioned, which we reduced that down to a 4 metre projection on the first floor. The accommodation will provide a large kitchen diner, family room for the on the ground floor, home office for the clients to work in, gym and storage, and a utility room which they don't currently have. On the first floor, good sized master bedroom, family bathroom for 2 boys, all on the same living space, to balance the property up for accommodation. The extension does not go any closer to 6 Worsley. It maintains that 6 metre offset. It's on the same building line. The single-storey rear extension, ridge heights are exactly the same as existing. It projects no further on the southern elevation. On the northern side, it comes out 1.2 metres in width, so it takes it to 5 metres in width in total. The 2-storey section is 7.9. It's a metre down from the main ridge. It's subservient to the main dwelling, so it's well in proportion to the main house, being a large detached house on a large plot. And what we've also incorporated into the design is that there's a large window, 5.5 square metres, looking out over a drive onto 6 Worsley. That will be removed and replaced with a smaller window, about a metre square. The first floor window in the dressing room that looks out onto 6 Worsley and 32 Central Drive will be removed. There'll be no windows looking out onto 6 Worsley or the other on the rear boundary, none whatsoever, which we currently do now. All the windows and all the orientation of the extension will be looked out onto the garden, onto the new extension. So we welcome the recommendation from the planners that have granted the application, or recommended to grant the application, and we thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, James.
2 seconds.
And again, thank you to all the speakers who've put the cases very eloquently this morning. Really appreciate that. I'll hand over back to the chairman now. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Again, thank you, speakers, for your contributions this morning. I'm going to go back to Andrew now, the officer, and he will continue with his presentation.
Thank you. Yes, so just revisit a couple of slides that I showed previously, just to help members understand the context of where the speakers have come from. So this is the application property. I think this is number 6. That was said to be number 7, and I believe that's where the other speaker referenced from. Application extension to the rear, 2-storey, single-storey, as I explained previously. This is a slide that I didn't show previously, but this shows the view from Central Drive, the well-used footpath, as was mentioned. So at the moment, the property is 2-storey with a single-storey element to the rear that connects on, doesn't connect on, but there is a detached garage at the bottom of the garden and an outbuilding to that. So the proposal here is to replace those with this 2-storey extension from the rear elevation of the property, and then a single story that extends entirely to the rear of the site. You'll see that the roofs are hipped in all areas. Presumably that's a deliberate attempt to not only reflect the character of the existing property, but also to help reduce the scale and massing of the extension when you consider how it may relate to some of the neighbours that will be located alongside it. I think this image also highlights some of the design work that's been done in terms of the window positions are consistent. This window here is consistent with the scale and design and location of the existing windows to the property. The mix of brick and render is consistent to that used in the existing property. And whilst the extension is at 2-storey, it is set down from the ridge of the main property. It's not as wide as the existing property, so therefore the roof doesn't need doesn't go up as tall. So in terms of the officer assessment, where we've come to the view that this allows the extension to appear subordinate to the existing property, but yet reflecting its design characteristics, that's kind of where that conclusion's coming from, is from factors like that. So just to come through a big lot of words there, but just run through the sort of the main planning considerations. Starting point is the planning policy that applies. This site is in the settlement, so in such locations the principle of extensions is acceptable, subject to the normal planning considerations. I think one of the speakers made reference to either it being a conservation area or being imminently a conservation area. That's not the case. It isn't a conservation area, so whether there may be a conservation area at some point in the future is obviously something that could happen, but at the point of determination of this application, there's no conservation area there's no draft conservation area or anything like that, so there is no heritage element to consider, no formal heritage element to consider. Although clearly it is an attractive area, it's a historic property, and I think the first speaker made that point very, very eloquently. Second bullet point relates to the design. As I discussed in my comments on the previous slide, the design is sympathetic to the existing dwelling and others in the area. The properties aren't all the same, but they are all of a similar scale, materials, sort of design cues. So there are sort of good linkages, I think, with this extension to not just the property but others around it. The next area of major interest is the impact on neighbours. The neighbour to the side, number 6. Clearly there will be some impact on that property, particularly massing impact. Two-storey extension projecting from the rear will be alongside that property and extend beyond its rear elevation or its first floor rear elevation. There's also a single-storey extension at that property, so there will be some massing impact on the rooms on that side and on lesser importance, but on its driveway. One of the key factors that we use for this is the council has an SPD, a supplementary planning document to give some guidance and consistency, and this scheme satisfies that at its revised state. One thing that's not mentioned in the officer report is the potential for extensions to be built without planning permission using permitted development rights. You can actually, whilst it's unusual, you can actually build a two-storey extension on the rear of a property without planning permission being needed. There are limits to that, and the limit is 3 metres, but and obviously at 4 metres this is above that, but there is that as a factor to perhaps take into account. Also look at the layout of the dwellings in terms of the separation between them and the sort of consistent building lines, and then obviously a reference right at the end there with the existing outbuilding and garages that there are at the rear. So the single-storey element is, whilst it is larger than what's there at the moment, it's to a significant degree hidden by the existing garage to that neighbour. Looking to the neighbour to the rear, that is well separated at first floor. The rear elevation of this extension doesn't provide any windows, so there's no overlooking towards that direction. And again, with the hipped roof design and the single-storey extension to the rear boundary, the relationship to that property is one that is considered acceptable. Just briefly touching on the other neighbours, there are properties, the property on the other side of Central Drive, that's well separated, and the distances are adequate to avoid any undue privacy loss being suffered by that property. There's also the large tree that was mentioned, and you've obviously seen on the photographs, that will filter views to a degree from certain aspects of that property. In terms of the occupier amenity, comes down to the overdevelopment suggestion that was made about the extension. The actual area of extra hard standing, if you will, extra footprint to the property is limited. There is the existing extension, there are the existing outbuildings and garages, So whilst this is more a footprint and it's connected footprint, the actual level of amenity space that is reduced is very limited. And the result from sort of our perspective is that the scheme isn't overly cramped and there is adequate amenity space retained for that property. Final bullet point relates to parking. The garage element is lost from this scheme, but the separation between this property and number 6 is a driveway. There's a 3 metre wide separation for a driveway, so there is sufficient parking on that driveway to provide for the parking needs of a dwelling of this size. So there's no issues with the parking requirements. So as a summary, I'd suggest to committee the recommendation is that planning permission be granted. One area that's come to mind whilst I've been sat here is that tree on the site is a significant and attractive feature and is subject to a tree preservation order. So in circumstances like that, it would be usual to impose a planning condition to deal with the logistics of construction work to ensure that the roots and the canopy of that tree are protected from any potential impact during construction works. Obviously, it's a sizable extension, so there will be some disturbance around the garden area. So I would suggest to committee that there's an additional condition imposed to require that a construction management plan and tree protection plan is put in place to ensure that that tree isn't harmfully impacted, because it clearly makes a very significant, attractive contribution to the street scene.
Thank you, Andrew. That concludes the officer presentation. We now move into a phase where we have questions or comments from members, and then obviously at some point that will evolve into a full debate. So can we start with Councillor Goodman, please? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Just a quickie with regard to the tree and conservation. Andrew, is it possible just for that particular tree to be pointed out exactly where it is?
Yes, this copper beech tree here is the one that I'm looking at. So the extension's over here. So sorry, it's this tree here that I'm referencing with respect to my suggested condition, councillor. The extension's over here, so it's not directly impacted, but in terms of the practicalities of building an extension, there will be building materials, contractors, cabins potentially. So I want to ensure that tree is not impacted in any way. It's this tree here and there. So you can see it will be visible in longer distant views. So it's one that is worthy of that extra protection.
Okay, thanks very much. That's helpful.
Councillor Dixon, then Councillor Griffiths.
Councillor Dixon, please.
Hi, Chair. Thanks very much. Yeah, obviously, so this came through as at Ansdell as well, and concerns were raised, and we passed them through to the planning department. I completely understand the need for the family perhaps to change the orientation of this house, because the front garden is essentially the back garden, and I see no problem with that. But the thing that sticks with me is the second story. Is the second story jutting out that far at the back? I think that's overdevelopment, and I think that's really detrimental sort of to the visual amenity of the area and for the neighbours. I wouldn't really have a problem if it was all single-storey extensions, I don't think, but just that extra floor at the back. I'm saying it's not overlooking the neighbours, but that means with little windows, that means they're looking at a brick wall instead, and I think that's a step too far for me. If it was single-storey extensions, I think I'd support it. I don't want to support it with that second storey on the back, having heard all the speakers today. And what does worry me is, I think Andrew said, you can do an extra 3 metres at the back without planning permission. But this house has been extended multiple times in the past. So where do we set back that you get an extra 3 metres from? Otherwise, we could get into the situation where I'm going to put 3 metres on the back, sell the house to my wife next year. She gets to put another 3 metres on. It's been done and done and done in the past. So it does consider, if we could just check and see the situation with that.
Yeah, just to come back on that that clarification, Councillor Dixon, the 3 metre, it relates to the original rear elevation of the property. So in saying that, I'm assuming that this is the original rear elevation of the property at first floor. So the 3 metre projection would be from that point, and it's a 3 metre ever projection. So you don't do 3 metres 1 year and then
Right.
your wife does 3 metres the year after. Sort of
Yeah.
thing.
But again, if you just come back, but that's already got extensions on the back which are 1 storey. Just could you just go up 3 metres above?
Yes, it would be a 3 metre projection in total. So you could, whilst the scheme here proposes 4 metres, and you couldn't just do this as permitted development as part of this scheme because it's got the other elements in it which require planning permission. But my point was that if there was a proposal to remove that single storey extension and construct a discrete 3 metre projecting 2 storey extension, that would be possible in this circumstance.
Thank you, Councillor Dixon. Councillor Griffiths, please.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I'm glad that Andrew has put, hopefully we can put the condition on the TPO tree. What is the overall footprint of the building then? Of all the buildings if the extension goes ahead? Do we have a figure?
I don't have a mathematical figure that I can give to you, I'm afraid. Yeah, I mean, the dimensions are on there, so we could work it out. But in terms of, perhaps the easiest way to demonstrate that would be to go back to the aerial images here. What you're seeing here, Councillor Goodman, is, sorry, Griffiths, you've got the single storey extension here, that comes down, so you get an extension. This grey area is patio, so you get, and the extension's a metre wider, and then it comes back to a building that replaces this garage and this outbuilding, and that outbuilding stops here, so it extends it up to the edge of where that patio is, in fact slightly further than that. So you've got kind of, you're filling in the link between the two and you're extending that forward slightly. So in terms of footprint, there is an increase, but it's, the point I was trying to make earlier is it's not a perhaps critical footprint to the amenity space for the property and leads to it being overdeveloped because it's in the most discreet part of the property when you view it from the street scene because it's set as far back as you can be from the public arena. And in terms of the occupier arrangements, it's not filling in areas that are obviously going to be available for use for hanging your washing out or kicking a football about or whatever, you know, you're doing, having your barbecue, whatever you do in your garden, you're not going to do it in that space here. So the loss of that isn't realistically over developing the property to that degree.
Right.
I
So,
appreciate I haven't got the mathematical, but hopefully that
so
explains.
there's no rear garden left, is it? Is it all at the front then, the open space?
The garden area for the property will be the front, the side, and all the bits, pretty much all the bits that you see that are grass on this aerial image.
Right.
And then a patio area, but less of the patio area because the single storey extension is wider than the existing single storey extension.
Right.
So you would have, presumably, if you're looking at these plans here, which is the extension plans, you've got this area of shaded area which would, I envisage as being the driveway to the property, the parking arrangements. You've got a path that you walk around the property, a path that leads to the pedestrian gate on the corner, a patio area here that's equivalent to the existing patio area, and then this green area that's retained as garden, albeit there is the protected tree in it, which obviously has an influence on it because of the scale of it.
Yeah.
Councillor Evans.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Andrew, for the presentation. I've got some sympathy with the objectors. I just want to tease a little bit out there, because obviously these are all substantial sized properties on this street anyway, and I don't think there is a back garden as such, because it's a corner property. The gardens are wraparound at this moment, and so I understand the concern that that's going to be dissipated by potentially overdevelopment of the site. And I agree with Councillor Dixon's point that having the neighbours already had an extension, a single-storey extension to the side of their property. And my first point really, Andrew, is because although the plan for the two-storey extension is a metre lower than the existing main building, it's still a storey higher than the existing extension, if that makes sense. And so that is going to have an impact, as we've heard, on light and view from the neighbouring property. Can you just set out for us what rights, if you want to put it that way, that the neighbours have to the view of the sky and light coming into their property for me? That would be really helpful.
So just to show that this is a comparison of the side elevations, so you can see now that the existing situation is a single-storey extension with hipped roofs, so there's eaves going up to a ridge. Same approach taken for the single-storey extension, and then the two-storey extension added to it. So in terms of the relationship of the properties, you've got, well, I suppose the first point I would make is that if we look at that image, this is orientated with the compass. So the application property is to the north of the neighbouring dwelling at number 6. So when the path of the sun comes round, it comes round in this direction. So the level of overshadowing, sunlight overshadowing into the neighbouring property will be very limited to high summer, late evening times when the sun gets that far round before it sets. And even then it may well be influenced by other factors. Then we've got a 3 metre wide drive to both properties. So we've got a 6 metre separation between the proposal and the neighbouring property. Then we've got, and I'll try and remember which way around to go. There we go. Then we've got the design of it with the hipped roofs to ensure that as little obstruction is provided to not just sunlight but also natural the natural daylight that there is from non-direct sunlight. And then we've got clearly a number of windows on this property along this side that obviously contribute to the amenity value of the occupiers of that property. The ones at first floor are facing the existing property directly. Obviously that property becomes deeper, but the impact on them, given the separation and the design, isn't something that I think creates any obvious officer concern in terms of that relationship. It's very similar to the situation that's now, and it's very similar to other situations that you find in domestic arrangements like that. You've got an element of the property here, a single-storey element that has windows on various sides, so you don't have primary windows, the only window into a room being the window that's affected. You've got a number of windows down there that serve the same room, and therefore, whilst there will be some impact from light loss, there will be some massing impact, there will be some loss of outlook from the rooms, particularly this one here. The judgment to be made is whether that is such harm that it leads to a refusal of the application being justified. the officer recommendation is that it's acceptable, but if there is an argument that the massing and the light loss impacts, particularly into that room where I've got the pointer now, if that is so harmful from this extension, then that could support a reason for refusal. That's not my view, and I've also mentioned the permitted development fallback situation for a relatively similar extension that could have the same impact, and potentially worse impact, if it was to be gable roofed. But I don't know whether that does directly answer your question, but hopefully that gives you a little bit more context for that particular
Thank
aspect.
you. It does help, and we also heard that the original plan has been adjusted. And am I right in thinking that originally the height was possibly the same height as the main house roof, and through discussions it's been agreed to be brought lower, or am I off the mark?
Yeah, this is the original scheme that was presented to us. So where we've got a first floor extension of 4 metres now, that was originally presented as a first floor extension of just shy of 8 metres. So that went all the way down to where the single storey building is now proposed. So instead of having 1 window, you had 2, and obviously the massing impact on the property to number 6 was equally doubled. So the heights of the extension hasn't changed in terms of the the modifications that have been made. It's just been reduced by half in projection.
Okay, that's really helpful. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Ledger.
Thank you, Chair. One of the speakers mentioned something about a conservation area, which I appreciate you touched on, saying it isn't one. And I think I also heard you say there's not even a draft or an application in yet. So I appreciate this. That's not material consideration. But just out of curiosity, theoretically, if it was, what extra considerations would we need to consider, and would this be significantly in or out of
in terms of conservation areas, this isn't a conservation area. I'm not aware of any measures to draw up a conservation area. If there was, there would need to be publication of a draft area, consultation on that, and various stages to go through. And as a bit like local plan preparation, as you go through those stages, that picks up weight in the decision. But there's no weight at this point because there is nothing to give weight to. If it was a conservation area, there are restrictions on what could be done as permitted development, and there are requirements to assess whether any extension or other development preserves or enhances the character of the conservation area. So there would be a slightly more rigorous test in terms of the design and the sort of impact on not just the property, but the contribution that the property made to the wider area. I'm not sure that would make any difference in this situation, because I think if you look at the scale and design of the extension, it's using a design that's it follows a design that's sympathetic to the property. It's using hipped roofs and bricks, render and tiles that reflect the existing property. You know, it's not a timber and glass box bolted on the back of an Edwardian property. It's, you know, it is something that would, I would say, reflect the character of this area, whether or not it's a conservation area or not. You'll see from this image that whilst there is similarity in scale and perhaps general design of the properties, there are wide-ranging differences in terms of their detail. You know, you've got grey roofs, red roofs, slate roof, you know, detached, semi-detached. There is that. It's not. They're all very attractive properties, undeniably, but they're not all exactly the same. Whereby doing a sort of a sizable extension on one then could impact on the overall. If that helps.
Hopefully that clarification was helpful, Councillor Ledger. Councillor Farrington, please.
Thank you. Not for the first time, Councillor Evans has beaten me to a question because, yeah, I think the key part for me is impact on neighbours. I can't, with the tree, really see how it significantly impacts number 7 across the road, but I can certainly understand why there would be issues with number 6 if the orientation of the sun was different. So crystallising it, there's going to be no shadows cast across their property at any time. There's no blockage from enjoyment of the garden. Even looking at the plans in terms of number 8's garden, you're just extending out on an existing concreted area. There's no diminution of the garden and greenery as such. So for me, it comes down to the promise made by the agent, James, who said that the property will blend in seamlessly, to quote him, with the existing property. And I would just like to know that if I vote in favour of this extension, that is going to be adhered to specifically, even if the bricks have to be reclaimed, that they match exactly, and it doesn't look suddenly like an obvious, completely different building just bolted onto the back. For me, that's the key thing, that they do it sympathetically with the look of the area, because actually I don't really see any key problem as you know, Andrew has pointed out. It is, well, we're talking about really, we're quibbling over a 1 metre difference of from permitted development on the first floor, first story. So that's really the sort of where I'm up to on it, and just would like to see some kind of guarantee there. Thank you.
He'll come back when he's had a look at a few things. Okay.
I'll come back now, Chair.
Oh.
That did take me very long, did it? In terms of the point that you make about the materials, as a standard approach on planning extensions, decisions of this nature, we would impose a condition to require that materials are on the agenda paper, page 70, it says to match the existing dwelling. If that was a particular concern, and I can see that it is quite important in this scale, in this occasion, we could revise that condition to be one that required that samples of the bricks are submitted for approval prior to works commencing. That will be a more robust approach, I think, taking sort of the point that Councillor Barrington raises. I would perhaps recommend that revision is made, having sat here and listened to the debate and looked at the property myself in terms of preparing for this agenda.
Thank you. Councillor Gardner.
Thank you, Chairman. I still remain a little bit concerned regarding the tree, and in particular where the construction works will be done from and the impact that might have on neighbours. It doesn't look like there's any access from the back of the property, and obviously we've got a very busy road on that road at the front. And how can the works be done in that space, given what looks like a very sizable tree? So that's my first question. And my second question is, in terms of the size of the extension, we've talked an awful lot about the bricks and matching the look of the overall property, which I think has been thoughtfully thought out by the agent. It's the additional stuff that sometimes can happen, like chimneys and open stoves and things like that, which has happened quite close to me, where there's been a change of look to the property because of what's going on inside. I just wondered if we've got any idea from the agent what additional stuff might be caused as a result of the extension. Thank you.
Dealing with that point, the plans that we determine here are the plans that they would build. So if there was to be a sort of a desire to put chimneys in and do things like that, that would be something that would need to be dealt with through a revision to the plans. So the plans presumably have been drawn up to consider the final project. So that's where our decision will be on these plans. In terms of the construction element, I don't know where the construction would come from, so I can't say that for definite. Obviously, there is that way, isn't it? There is the driveway to the front that will allow an access. Sorry, I'm going the wrong way, apologies. So you've got an access point here that comes down the side of the property and presumably will allow erection of scaffolding and storage of materials and what have you in that location. Whether there would then be a suggestion to take a secondary access point through here to allow more of a working space into this garden area here, I don't know, but that wouldn't be something that would be a factor to take into account in determining a planning application. We're looking at the resultant scheme rather than the practicalities of how it's implemented, other than we want to make sure that we protect the tree in that construction work because of its attractiveness.
May I just briefly, on that point, come in, Andrew? The road immediately to the north, which is the extension of Central, am I right in thinking that that is an unadopted road?
I would say it is from having jogged down there several times. It's clearly not surfaced.
Would that therefore have an impact on its potential use as the construction site, or
potentially legal implications as to whether the owner of the property has a right to use it, but that again wouldn't be a matter that we would look at in terms of our decision. There is the access available from Worsley Road to the front drive, so again I don't know the details of how they would do it, but there is an opportunity should that central drive access or central drive potential access not be available.
Thank you.
For information, there has been, to my knowledge, an ongoing dispute in terms of the status of the private section of Central Drive, and there have been some residents, a number of them, that have been challenging whether it's unadopted and whether it is actually adopted by Lancashire County Council. To my knowledge, that has not been resolved and is ongoing litigation, I think, in terms of that. So technically I think it still is unadopted, but I just want members to be aware there has been, over a period of years, a contracted dispute and challenges to Lancashire County Council in terms of their likely ownership of this, but as I say, that has not been concluded satisfactorily. Councillor Griffiths.
Thank you. Which way does the house face? North or south? East. Right.
Yeah, if good question. Go back to this. So this is oriented north. The one on the left hand side is oriented north. So that's north. So that's east. That's south, and that's west.
Right.
Sorry, I did that quickly.
I just still have concerns about the impact on the neighbour with the boundary wall and the light that's available for that. Did Councillor Dixon say he was going to propose refusal earlier?
Certainly said I wouldn't support it. I mean, I would be happy to move refusal, Chair.
I would second refusal, I think. Thank you.
Well, in the circumstances we find ourselves, I'm going to do my usual thing that, you know, we've had a proposal to refuse and seconded, but I'm going to park that and continue with the debate because I think there are some outstanding issues that perhaps members want to discuss. Councillor Evans.
Well, that throws a bit of a spanner in the works. I mean, I think it's a very interesting debate, this one, because, you know, you could quite easily see that the area could become a conservation area down the line. And I think we often look, but we can't take that into consideration for this application today. but we often see areas in the file where we look back retrospectively and think, why was that ever allowed to be built there? Because it doesn't then meet the conservation requirements that have come along at a later stage. And there are some interesting properties down there. There's a lovely Art Deco property a little bit further down the road. And I understand the argument. Yeah, I think it's the one with the green roof, I think, Andrew. I understand the concerns for overdevelopment of the site, because, you know, you can see this is a sizable extension, but because of where it is in proximity to the site overall, if we were able to, and I think Andrew's alluded to this, if you were able to sort of have mind for the fact of it potentially being a conservation area in the future, so doubling those conditions in terms of quality of bricks and the sympathetic way that the development is taken forward, I would be mindful to support it, because the answers that you gave earlier when I asked about the light coming into the property, adjacent property, and the fact that the plan's been revised from what was originally put forward, I think there's been some movement there. So I take colleagues' point, but I'll be happy with the officer's recommendations on this case. Thank you.
Is that a formal proposal to?
Yes, but I'm happy to let it play out.
Okay.
Chairman, we've got
Councillor
Settle. I'm just wondering on that previous point as to the impact of a future conservation area, whether we need to seek a bit of further clarification legally or...
I mean, I think I would like to get clarification regarding the position that we normally have, is that we have to judge the application that
Chairman, if
is before us.
Can help.
And I would like clarification on that, because that would lead me to believe that actually we can't anticipate any future status, etc.
I can assist on that. If you've got the property isn't there is no conservation area. If it were, it would be a designated heritage asset, and that will be taken into account, as I explained in the answer to the earlier question. Whilst it's not a conservation area, it is obviously an attractive property, an attractive area. We're not going to sort of differ from that view. So it would be a non-designated heritage asset. So that's an area that's got some attractiveness and historic and architectural interest, but it isn't formally recognised in that way. What I'm trying to find is the relevant section of the MPPF, and then I can read it to you, which talks about that. So if it was a designated asset, you would need to look at whether there's harm, and then you would need to weigh up whether there are any measures that outweigh that harm. So if you were, I don't know, extending a listed building and that extension allowed it to be viably used, that would be something to take into account alongside the harm to the listed building from the extension. So the paragraph 216 of the MPPF, the effect of an application on the significance of a non-designated heritage asset should be taken into account in determining the application. In weighing applications that directly or indirectly affect non-designated heritage assets, a balanced judgment will be required, having regard to the scale of any harm or loss and the significance of the heritage asset. So that's, for what value it adds, that's the guidance in the MPPF in terms of non-designated heritage assets. So you might be looking at whether there is a harm from extending this property in this way, and then any benefits to the occupiers or the surrounding area.
Chief of Planning, I think, has indicated and would like to contribute to this. So sometimes you're sitting down here, which is so it's quite normal. It's just that you happen to be sitting in the public gallery, because we don't normally take any contributions from the public in the public gallery, but the head of planning would normally be sitting over here and can and often does contribute. So bring you in, Paul. Thank you.
Thanks.
That sort of confirms, I think, what I was saying in my belief that we have to judge the application as it stands, and we can't prejudice that by anticipating any future developments, which may or may be likely. Councillor Settle, thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm agreeing with Councillor Dixon. It's the two-storey element that bothers me. I think one of the speakers mentioned earlier that when these houses are built, the garden areas were always a bit sort of minimal compared to the actual size of the house. So any sort of extensions, two-storey, just make that worse visually to me and start to change the character of the area. Quite apart from the fact that number 6 will have a problem. So it's changing the character of the area from sort of a nice vista as you're walking along the road there to, if everyone to have second-storey extensions, it starts to make it, and I don't say it, almost like an inner city area where you don't have gardens, etc. And you've got 2-3-storey buildings all next to each other, which is completely 180 degrees opposite to what Ansdell is. So it's just the visual aspect that bothers me. And I realise that should they wish, they can do a 3-metre extension, but and I couldn't stop that, but I just don't like the whole idea of the 2-storey extension. The single-storey, okay. So I'll be voting against. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Settle. Councillor Nixon.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning. The side view, I'm looking on Street View now, and the side view to the property at the side, the one that's the semi-detached one. Now that's got some windows on the side. Is part of the end window of that, is that an extension on that property?
You're going to have to help me out a little bit. What are you looking at, Councillor?
Right, the semi-detached next door.
I'm looking at this property here.
Yeah, so you've got 3 windows there.
Yeah.
Is that part? No, on the second floor, the upstairs. Here. That's part of the original property, is it?
Yes.
Yeah, that's not.
Yeah, I would assume so.
It looks
it's under
like
the main
it,
roof,
it?
isn't it? Yeah. Whether those windows were there originally or not, I don't know, but they certainly look like it, given the framing around them. You can see on that image.
And that window on the ground floor that's directly below it, so it's like the very last window of what was the original house. I'm assuming the extension is the on the the first floor that juts out at the back of there. That window there, that's the one in question that's going to be affected by any light. I understand.
Yeah, I mean that's a view to reach, but it would be logical that that's the one that's alongside the property, so that's the one that is most likely to be impacted the most.
And do we know what room that is in that house? Is that relevant or not?
It's relevant. I understand it's the dining room to the property, which is a habitable room, so that's one that we look to protect. It's a amenity. It's not a hallway or a bathroom or whatever, or a utility.
Okay. And at the moment, it's not impacted by any shadowing, is it not? Or is it?
I've not had the benefit of going into that room personally, but in terms of the orientation of the sun, as I described earlier, it's due south of the application property, so the level of natural direct sunlight coming in there will be limited, if at all. There will be obviously a more open aspect from the angle that this image on the screen is taken, which will be closed down to a degree by the projection of the extension. So it's for you as a committee to come to a view as to whether you think that level of enclosure is sufficiently harmful that it justifies a refusal.
And what's the separation between the properties, right from
6 metres.
6 metres.
6 metres. Yeah, there's a 3 metre driveway down the side of each property.
Okay. Right, thank you.
There are no more names down on the piece of paper that's next to me, so I'm sort of asking members, do they have any further comments or questions regarding this? I mean, formally, we do have a move from Councillor Dixon and Councillor Griffiths for refusal. We've had a proposer for approval from Councillor Evans, and Councillor Farrington is seconding that. We would go to the first vote, and if that falls, we would then go to the second vote. If it is refused, then we have a protocol, I'm explaining this to everybody, that we would adjourn, where the officers would work with the people that have proposed refusal in terms of working at substantive reasons.
Chairman, we need to do that.
We need to do that now.
Okay, all right, okay, right. So what we do is adjourn and then come back in. So we have now actually formally had a proposal for refusal.
That's my understanding, Catherine. Yeah.
So in other words, we've had that proposal, so we would have to adjourn and discuss possible potential substantive reasons.
Yes, Chairman, the normal protocol would be for yourself, myself, the Vice Chairman, the proposer, which I believe was Councillor Dixon, and the seconder, Councillor Griffiths, to adjourn to the
members' room is available.
So we'll resume our seats, please. That would be great. Andrew's going to explain the nature of our discussions in there and what comes next.
For external seating spaces. That's the toilet shower block, so it's designed basically on the appearance of the stagecoach, is very similar in height and in footprint. It won't have an awning though, will be finished in timber with a metal sheet roof. So moving on to main issues, the site is within Countryside. Policy GD4 is of relevance, that allows support for uses which are appropriate to the rural area. That includes those uses which help diversify the rural economy and includes specifically small-scale tourist accommodation. Assessment, we've determined that the application site is small, the number of units is similarly small, so we do consider it to be small-scale tourist accommodation. That would help to diversify the rural economy. Obviously it is for a holiday use. We wouldn't want any alternative use moving in, such as a permanent residential accommodation, so a condition is advised to retain the use for holiday purposes. Another key assessment obviously is design and landscape and visual impact. So relevant policies are GD7 and GD4. GD4 specifically, I say, supports small-scale tourism accommodation, though that is subject to a separate test, that it being sensitive to its surroundings. So there is some harm to countryside character. Anybody that's been on that back road between Lytham and Rain Green may have picked up on the awnings, certainly of the stagecoaches. That attracts the eye. It's no doubt about that. But obviously with the change in colour to dark green, that certainly is going to help considerably in not hiding them, but certainly will soften the impact that, and in comparison to the existing appearance. We also have the landscaping proposals, which includes hedge planting to the western boundary. So on that basis, we consider the development, it does have an impact, but not sufficient really to warrant refusal of the proposal. We also have impacts to surrounding occupiers, so if I just flip back to the aerial, we can see that the application site, it's positioned to the north of a building group. That building group includes housing, back garden areas, although a lot of the back garden areas, like the application site, have stables and riding areas. There is a good separation distance between the glamping pod area and nearest garden spaces ranging between 150 to 250 metres. Members of the committee, they may recall an application a couple of years back at Stanley Villa, which was for perhaps a more intensive glamping development. That was overturned by committee, and through the appeal process, the inspector of that appeal determined that the provision of a site management plan would be a satisfactory means to overcome any concerns that neighbours had for residential amenity. So the assessment has took a similar path as that application. The applicants provided a site management plan which includes noise curfews, a curfew on the use of music amplifiers, no large groups, albeit it's only for 4 glamping units anyway, and again, alcohol consumption should be moderate. Obviously, the operational elements certainly of the management plan, that is subject to enforcement by the applicant. Now, in this circumstance, it's helpful that the applicant lives on site so they can actively monitor any activities that are on or going on in the glamping units, and obviously actively enforce the management plan if needed. So Environment Protection have been consulted on the development importing the management plan, and they have no objection to the scheme, subject to obviously the site's operation in accordance with that management plan. There are no other technical matters, Chair, to warrant refusal of the proposal, so the application is recommended for approval, and that is subject to adoption of the applicant's habitat regulations assessment and a schedule of conditions.
Thank you, Rob. Councillor Goodman.
Thank you very much, Chair. I've got 2 questions. The first one, may we see where the car parking is again in relation to those stagecoaches, please?
I don't have a site plan in its entirety because it's so long I've had to break it.
Okay.
But if I use this red edge, so the glamping units are here.
Yes.
And the car park spaces are in this location here. So you park up, walk back,
and walk.
And then,
yeah.
Which is that path, and then obviously into the glamping units.
I think my concern was that they weren't going too close to affect all that gravelled area and churning it up. Obviously, it doesn't look too far to carry cases.
Yeah, that space where the parking bays are, that's an existing concrete hard surface.
Okay, that's. And the second question was, I may have missed this, do we know how many persons each stagecoach is set up for?
No. The plans, obviously, of the stagecoach, that gives us a floor plan. It's obviously an open plan space. It shows a single bed, but you can quite easily squeeze a double bed in there.
Yeah.
You may be able to squeeze a single or two singles. So it's aimed certainly at couples or potentially small families, I would say.
That was my thought. I thought that the most I thought was maybe mum, dad and 2 children.
Possibly.
Might be pushing it a little bit, but obviously it says no large groups. So I think you wouldn't be pushing many people into one of those. Okay, thank you. That's really helpful.
Thank you. Councillor Settle.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm very happy with the proposal. There's no objections from the statutory consultees, highways, etc. The only objection is the parish council, because of the visual sort of issue. It seems an awful long way from Lytham Road, though. I can't really see that being a problem, especially as now you've said make them green, not white, so I'm very happy with that.
Yeah, I mean,
a nice sort of
Just to come back on that, it was a 2023 plan application, so it has, determination has been delayed by statutory consultees, and that mainly with Natural England, who required peat surveys to be undertaken. The applicant's gone through the expense and both the time in wastage of not being able to occupy the stagecoaches, and I'd say it's probably been delayed by about 18 months to get to the point of the applicant provided all the information necessary to allow Natural England to remove their objection.
I think they're going a bit over the top there with 4 stagecoaches. I think a bit of overkill there, but fair enough.
I would agree. Obviously, the Natural England, they have maps which kind of map out where peat reserves potentially are within the borough and across the UK. So when development hits that, it's a statutory response to say you need to justify your development and show to us that there is no impact upon peat. In this circumstance, the only ground disturbance is associated to the hard standings, and as you can see, that's going to be very shallow. So how that would actually hit the peat if there was peat below the site, albeit there isn't peat below the site, I don't know. But we had all those conversations, and hence why it's took 18 months to get to yourselves.
Thank you. Councillor Gardner.
Thank you, Chairman. You say that the Environment Agency would have to be comfortable with fowl going into the waterway. Are they comfortable, or have I missed that point? Has that been looked at?
Sure. No, they haven't looked at it from a water discharge perspective. They provided in their comments advisory notes saying that the applicant needs to go through a separate consenting regime with them. So basically, if the application gets approved and the applicant wants to implement the foul treatment plant, prior to implementing it, they have to get the authority of the Environment Agency to do so. So that will check that the treatment plant is acceptable in terms of discharge, so it's treating all the effluent from the shower block, but also the discharge rate, so the amount of water that gets released into Raybrook is sufficient. So they wouldn't want effluent just running open-ended into the water course. It would have to drip feed into there. But importantly, the water that gets released is cleansed before it goes into Raybrook, so it won't actually be polluted water that goes into Raybrook.
Councillor Evans.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Thank you, Rob. You're pleased to know just a couple of points from me. I think the water, I think it's classed as grey water, isn't it? So it's not fit for drinking, but it's fit to released into the environment. Just a couple of clarifications, really. You showed the picture with the boundary plant in there. That's a great back one, if we can. There you go. So your pointer was indicating the full length of that green line and down. Can we just clarify with you, is the boundary planting right the way down there or just along the red edge?
Change to this photo first, so you can see sorry, Chair. So you can see from both those photos that there's no boundary treatment other than post and wire fencing along that western boundary. That's probably where the stagecoaches are most visible from, bearing in mind you have small views from Lytham Road and you got the public right-of-way. The public right-of-way is flanked by a hedgerow. It's 3, maybe 4 metres, so in the majority of circumstances you can't see, but where there are breaks such as field gates, then you can see through those gates and you can see obviously the stagecoaches. So applicant's solution is to cover or change the awning colour to a dark green, but also provide this hedgerow boundary which extends from this point to the north to this point to the south.
Okay.
But also provides cover along that southern boundary as well. So the primary views of the site are going to be enclosed by a new hedgerow.
Lovely. And secondly, in terms of conditions, I can see that there are curfews and noise restrictions on there, which is useful for the neighbouring properties. Is there any condition in terms of cooking, barbecuing, fires, open fires outside at all that we need to be aware of? fires only in designated areas that are controlled. Okay.
That in terms of fire risk as well. Don't know why that's. So the Lancashire Fire and Rescue Service have been consulted on the application. They've provided us with some feedback. It's not an objection, but that points to the Fire Safety Act 2005, which requires them to do a fire risk assessment and agree that with the Lancashire Fire Service, and that's prior to operation. So that will look at what will happen in the event of a fire, evacuation, firefighting, access, and those kind of things. And so there's an informative relating to that requirement advised as well.
Thank you. Councillor Farrington.
Thank you. It seems comprehensive in terms of the management plan and the provisions there, and because there's somebody on site at the moment, the only sort of what ifs and what could happen in the future, protection for the neighbours, although they're, I think, reportedly 150 metres away. I don't know how this would work, but if, for example, the owners moved out or rented their property and there was no one on site to manage and keep their eye on it, or if they sold the business as an overall going concern but weren't on site, perhaps had renters in, how does it work in those provisions work then?
Yeah, it's a good question. I referred back to the Stanley Villa example, and in that situation, there's nobody living on that site. So that's relying upon operations still in accordance with the management plan, but the applicant ensuring, obviously, compliance with that management plan. In this circumstance at the moment, obviously, we have the applicant who lives on site. That might not always be the case. Like say, the dwelling could be sold on, but the applicant could keep retention of the glamping units, for example. Notwithstanding that though, obviously the management plan would still be applicable, so they would still need to have that operation in accordance with that management plan, and the condition allows us to take enforcement action in the event that there is non-compliance. Andrew might want to interject on this one, if you listen, Andrew, at the back. There may be circumstances where we can grant personal permissions. So we could grant a personal permission in this circumstance to potentially protect that scenario arising by obviously separating out the ownerships. That could be something that we could consider as a committee, like I say, to prevent the subdivision of the, if you will, the planning unit, as in the glamping units, from the house that the applicant lives in. Agree or disagree?
Jeopardy.
I think there is a provision in planning legislation for personal permissions to be granted. However, the provision is one that the guidance says should be used only in exceptional circumstances or something like that. And whether this is suitably exceptional for that, I perhaps doubt. Am I reading it that the concern is that if there were to be people staying in this accommodation that was unruly and the occupants of the property weren't there to manage it, it might cause wider disturbance? Is that essentially the concern?
I think it's more to do with the fact that at the moment, with the applicant living in the property, they have that natural surveillance to monitor the implementation of the site operation. Thinking about it with Andrew's kind of input, we have to be reasonable and just in the requirement for planning conditions.
Yeah.
The whole point of the site management condition is to control the site operations. The benefit of the applicant living on site is just that they are there on hand to react to any circumstances. So I would say that the management plan itself is sufficient to deal with the amenity or potential amenity issues.
And I think that the business model as well is because people who operate this type of accommodation will want to have people come in there who are not being disturbed by other guests on the site, and that it seems to, whether it's somebody living on the site or somebody living remotely, if they will all have contact details, or there's somebody in the other pod who's creating an issue, can you come and sort them out? And I think that would tend to be the way that these things would police, particularly when we're looking at for relatively modest sized. It's not somewhere where you're going to get a lot of, you know, a gang of stag doos or people who are on a golfing trip or whatever are going to stay there, and you know, it's more likely to be aimed at the couple with young baby going away somewhere for a bit of peace and quiet, and having that type of accommodation. So I would suggest that the conditions that are suggested in the agenda papers are the ones that we stick to deal with that aspect.
Thank you. Councillor Nixon.
Right, just a couple of things. On the application, it says there's 4 stagecoaches. 3 of the stagecoaches positioned adjacent to the western boundary of the application site, with the 4th and the shower block positioned immediately to the rest. It's the other way around, that, isn't it?
That's an error in the report. Well, you picked up on the mistake in the report. Thank you for that, Councillor.
So you get our prize for the day.
To clarify, there's a last-minute revision which wasn't included within the report. So to clarify, these 2 units are glamping pods. This is the shower block facility, and these 2 are the further glamping pods. So.
Right. I mean, it doesn't.
Apologies.
Accepted. It doesn't actually really matter. It's just I wanted it clarifying. So the other question is, you talked about the shower water and whatever in the treatment. Where's the toilet water? Where's the other bits from the shower block, the toilet stuff going?
So
yeah, without putting it in the words I would use, but where is it going?
The nicest way. So all the foul water, which is the shower water, the toilet water, including solids and liquids, goes along this pipe into the foul treatment plant. That then gets treated. The water gets discharged, the treated water, the clean water gets discharged into the watercourse. The solids, which get removed from not being allowed to go into the watercourse, will physically be removed from the site. So this is, dare I say, it's a standard way to deal with foul water where you can't get a link up to the natural sewage system that runs along the roads. So a lot of properties who are positioned in rural areas have foul package treatment plants to deal with their foul water as a solution. So it's not unusual by any means. Where they can, they have to discharge to watercourses, but it only ever allows for the discharge of water, and it's clean water.
Who checks that? Who checks that on a regular basis? I mean,
like Andrew says, it's there's a separate consenting regime which, with the Environment Agency, the applicant will have to go through to make sure that the package treatment plant is sufficient in size to cope with the demands that it's put on it, but also it has the appropriate form of treatment to suit whatever is going to be going through it, and then to treat that water before going and discharging into the watercourse. As part of that consenting regime, there'll be maintenance requirements as well, so regular checks on whatever it is needed to obviously cleanse that water as well.
It's not a council responsibility to check it afterwards. It becomes the responsibility of United Utilities or whoever. Environment. Okay.
It's Leeds Local Flood Authority and the Environment Agency jointly. They control all the watercourses in the borough. Some are either managed by the LLFA or some are managed by the Environment Agency. This is a main river, and it's on that basis it's managed by the Environment Agency.
Councillor Gardner wanted to...
Did you want to come back, Councillor Gardner? Come on.
Thank you, Chairman. I have reservations approving something when that's not in place. I know Raybrook's got issues with high levels of sewage from other sources. I just feel uncomfortable. I don't know whether the rest of the committee feel like that, and I'm just uncomfortable about passing something until that's in place. I'd appreciate other people's comments.
Yeah, but I think like I said before, that this isn't an unusual solution to foul drainage at all in a rural area. You look at a lot of dwellings, businesses, for example, they are all dependent upon these foul treatment plants because they can't connect to the main sewerage system. As a reassurance, I suppose, they have to go through the body, so either the LLFA or the Environment Agency, before they connect into Raybrook to make sure that the treatment plant that they are putting in is satisfactory. That's a separate consenting regime. Planning legislation dictates that we can't duplicate what is contained within other legislation, for example, or other regimes. So we are relying upon the watercourse consent that will be needed from the Environment Agency to basically make sure that the foul package treatment plant satisfies the requirement of the development.
Just to say on page 14, a very important paragraph there which refers to GD4, and this is one, a section of that where it refers to other appropriate uses in a rural area, including uses which would help to diversify the rural economy, including small-scale tourist accommodation, which is basically this. So there's policy justification for this, and if members are satisfied of this, are there any other further comments or questions?
Chairman, there is further advice on that point on page 31 of the agenda papers, the Environment Agency, non-mains drainage advice to the applicant, which I think will address some of Councillor Gardner's concerns there.
Yeah, sorry, just leading on from the discussion we've been having. Obviously, we went through the Environment Agency for comments. They haven't objected to the scheme, and with regards to connection to the watercourse, they've advised of this consenting regime that the applicant has to go through. And there's an informative note which will be attached to the decision notice, which will draw attention to that process to the applicant.
Do we have any movers for approval? Councillor Settle, you're moving approval. Councillor Pittman, you're seconding. Are we happy to go to the vote, members? Okay, all those in favour, please indicate. I think that's unanimous. Thank you, and that's
Chairman,
passed.
I am slightly...
Okay. We now go to item 2. Thank you, Rob. Thank you. Hilltop Farm, Back Lane, Wheaton. Over to Andrew again.
Firstly, I'll let the IT team know of the timing of the Vice Chairman's joke, and they can cut it out of the live stream. Hilltop Farm, Back Lane, Wheaton. This is an application for some gypsy accommodation. So the site in question is, just let me get the pointer pitched on, is alongside the motorway, just the other side of the motorway, if you come from Wesham, along Wheaton Road towards Wheaton, just when you go over the motorway, you then get to the crossroads to go left to Wheaton, straight on towards Wheaton Camp, or right towards Greenhalgh. It's just on that corner. So it's a rectangular part of a triangular site, if that isn't too confusing. It's located in the countryside with generally agricultural uses around. There is a boarding kennels opposite, and there are sporadic farms and other dwellings around the site. The site has a lawful use as a single gypsy pitch, and the proposal is to subdivide that to form a total of 6 pitches. So there's no increase in the size of the site, there's no increase in changing the access arrangements, it's just a more intensive use of the existing site. We've had objections from a number of parish councils around that area, Wheaton, Greenhalgh and Singleton, but the officer recommendation is for approval. So this is the site in more detail. So very clearly you can see the extent of the pitch. It's got a hard surfaced area on it. It was formerly in an equestrian use. So you've got a stable building here, and then there's a relatively modern looking storage building in the middle of the site. The access point is here. Wheaton's down there, Wheaton Camp's up there, Wesham's down that way. The existing accommodation is limited to a mobile home and static caravan, which are currently tucked against the motorway boundary here, with the motorway, obviously the bridge goes over the motorways in a cutting at that point, with trees up the embankment. So this is the application that we have. So the proposal is to retain the access, retain the site boundary, retain this stable building, which is in use as kind of a laundry and sort of domestic store, retain this storage building and retain the existing pitch in this southern boundary. There's also other land within the ownership over to the east, so there's an access retained through to that. But alongside that, you can see that the site is split into 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 further pitches, each of which is shown with a sort of a holiday lodge, a static lodge type accommodation, and a space for touring pitch and parking and what have you. Alongside those individual pitches, there's an area in the centre which is available for communal parking of, I don't know, perhaps larger commercial vehicles, or and also for the use of sort of a bin storage area. So this is a street view image a couple of years ago. So this is the access point. This is the camera's looking back from the junction, so that's heading up towards Greenhalgh. Existing sort of elaborate, extravagant, large access point. Fences around the site, hedges outside the fences, storage building, and then the stable building. This is some pictures I took earlier this year, so you can see the hedges perhaps recovered a little bit in these images. This is intended to show the visibility that's available from the access point. So you've got a relatively straight run in that direction, perhaps 100 metres or so to the crest of the hill. It's 35 metres in that direction to the junction. This is the access point opposite to the kennels. I think it's called Happy Hounds Kennels, that's what it says on that sign. And then that road going across the junction goes to Wheaton in the distance there. These are some pictures from on the site. Existing occupiers, lodge, touring caravan. There was a second caravan at the time I visited, not entirely sure what was happening there, but you can see it's a relatively spacious area. I'm stood at the same place when I'm taking these two pictures, so I'm looking that way and looking that way on the left-hand side, so you've got quite an area there. And then this would be the boundary of the site, this timber fence, with the land beyond being outside the site for this gypsy use. So, considerations we'll look at, it's in the countryside, policy GD4 restrictive, but does allow for certain things. This isn't one of them, so it's contrary to policy GD4. It's effectively residential development. However, there are additional policies that deal with gypsy and traveller accommodation, both nationally. There's a specific planning policy for travellers' sites, and then locally there's something called the Gypsy and Traveller Accommodation Assessment. Now, that is done periodically and is one of the background documents that we've done as part of the review of the local plan. So there was one done 2016 to inform the adoption of the local plan, and then that's been revisited, like I say, December 24 for the new local plan. When we did it 2015, that concluded there was a need for some gypsy accommodation, and then the local plan allocated sites for that. But it also included a reference in a specific gypsy accommodation policy to what happens if you get a further need. Where do you put that? How do you assess the planning merits of that? So there is a policy H5 in the local plan, which specifically deals with gypsy accommodation and has that two parts. We approve these sites, but if we look at other sites, we'll look at these policies. Excuse me. So the gypsy traveller accommodation assessment that was done last year concluded that there was an unmet current need for additional pitches. Now that's done through surveying the existing gypsy population within the borough and looking at what's likely to come about from new household formation. So they've got, you know, kids that are 18, 19, 20 that are likely to be establishing their own accommodation in the coming years. So that document says that we have a current need of 4 pitches, then there's a need moving forward for the period after 2027, and then needs going forward beyond that. So the latest policy position is that there is an outstanding unmet need identified within our surveys for at least 4 gypsy pitches. Now that in planning policy terms, that's the same as a housing supply situation. So where you don't have a 5-year housing supply for dwellings, we have to look more favourably on planning applications for residential development. We heard about the Rear Green appeal being allowed on that basis at the last meeting. The same applies for gypsy pitches. So that means that where we have an unmet need, we have to look at delivering that need where we can more favourably than just saying, well, we don't need it because the policy says we don't need it. So the view here is that we have a need, and this is a good place to meet that need. The reason I say that is because the policy H5 goes through a series of criteria. Don't put it in the green belt, don't put it in areas of flood risk, don't put it in places where it's going to over-dominate the village, don't put it in places where the access is dangerous. Do put it, firstly, on previously developed land, which this is. Do look at existing sites that could be more efficiently used. Well, this is a big site for 1 pitch, and that's what they're looking to do. And do put it in places where there is reasonable access to services. So whilst it's not alongside the edge of Wheaton Village, it's not too far away. It's not too far from Wesham. So in terms of school provision, going to church, village hall, other sort of community linkages, there are facilities within a reasonable distance of this site without it being miles down a farm track. So the scheme does all those things, and the officer view is that it satisfies this windfall criteria of policy H5. And I think I've talked about everything that's on that slide. Certainly the top bits. So the access points, saw from the pictures, it's a good, well-established access. It's far enough away from the junction to avoid that being a highway safety danger. It is something that the parish councils have raised concern with, but it's not something that the Highway Authority raise any objection to. They were looking at some conditions for construction management and maintenance, but I've explained in the report, while I don't think those are appropriate. But in terms of network capacity, position of junction, design of junction, visibility from junction, they're all fine with that. The scheme obviously provides a suitable surface and a suitable area for parking, both individually and for commercial uses. There is a neighbour opposite, but obviously they're already opposite a gypsy pitch. The level of the intensification of the use could bring additional levels of noise and activity and what have you, but they are across the road. They are relatively well screened. It's already a property that has a level of activity, given that it's a boarding kennel. So it's conclude that the amenity impacts are acceptable in that respect. Visually, the site is contained by landscaping buffers, by fencing, by the topography of the land. It's one that could accommodate these caravans and the other development that goes with the gypsy pitch without it being overly harmful. But along that point, there is an element of the scheme which proposes additional landscaping. So you've got landscaping proposed here, which I think will be helpful. If I go back to the picture, that's here. So that will help in these views that you do get from this aspect of the site. That's also helpful for them in biodiversity terms, because they need to deliver some biodiversity net gain, and that will do that, given the existing arrangement on site is that there's obviously very limited ecological value on that site at present. So taking all that together, the officer recommendation is that the scheme is acceptable, and so planning permission should be granted.
Thank you, Andrew. Councillor Evans.
Thank you, Andrew, and I echo your points that you raised there. Obviously, going through the local plan steering group meetings, it was clearly identified that utilising, maximising existing sites as opposed to looking for new sites was the right and appropriate way to go. And having expressed that there is a need, then we need to provide accommodation or pitches somewhere, so this would be an obvious place to go. The building looks quite substantial within the middle there, so quite large for a bin store. It'd be quite interesting to know a little bit what the owners are the owners of the site are permitting. Well, first of all, are the owners of the site the people who already have the existing unit on that piece of land? And if that's the case and they're continuing to live there, then presumably they've got some control over the site. But what exactly is that building used for? Is there any controls in terms of light pollution, in terms of more substantial lighting being put within the site, and could that have a knock-on effect? And my final point would be, you've alluded to the fact that there's separation, but it is very close to the motorway, and is there any additional fencing or controls that would stop sort of ingress from the site onto the motorway that could cause problems?
I'm going to start writing your questions down, because there's always quite a lot of them, isn't there? Well, the site history was that before it was a gypsy pitch, it had a lawful use for equestrian, private stabling, and that used all this triangle of land. Those two boundaries come together to a point. So there was permission for this building to be put up as private stables. There was then a planning permission granted for it to be used as a sort of an equestrian education facility. So that's where this building came from. So that was put up as an education building. So whilst go back to my pictures. Whilst it looks like a relatively utilitarian, industrial, agricultural type building, its original purpose, according to the planning permission that was granted, was for it to provide some classroom space for people learning about horsecraft. And there's one, I've been inside it, one half of it is there's a series of blockwork subdivisions into rooms, 3 or 4 rooms. The other half with the roller shutter door is larger, so presumably you would get a horse in there and through a horse box and be able to, you know, watch people do whatever grooming or whatever you would do to it. There's no windows in it, but when the site went out of that equestrian use, it was bought by the current owner, who is the person who lives on the site, and he's the person who submitted this application to intensify the occupation of it. So in discussions with him, he's explained that he's got children who are getting to that age where they're looking to set up their own pitch. He's explained his brother's got children, so his nephews and nieces are of that age as well. So there's that sort of linkage that has been explained to me. But this isn't presented as their family accommodation. It's wider gypsy accommodation in more general terms. But my experience of these situations is that where you have an owner on site like this, they tend to manage who occupies the pitches and whether they sell them on or rent them out to families or, you know, people who they have family connections to. Tends to be the way these things work. In terms of the motorway, when the original gypsy pitch idea was granted planning permission, we consulted with National Highways, who imposed a condition that required a fence to be erected along the motorway boundary, so that when vehicles were being driven around on that land, because it's elevated, it wasn't causing a distraction when you're driving down the motorway. So that's this fence here. So that runs across the full boundary with the motorway of the pitch. Obviously, you can see here it's quite dense landscaping anyway, but that 2 metre close boarded fence provides a solid screen between the site and the motorway, both for sort of headlights and presumably also for access for people getting on the motorway. Obviously, you know, anybody can make efforts to get onto the motorway if they're so inclined, but there's that protection on this site which was put in place as a consequence of a condition that was requested by National Highways previously. In fact, the access point was moved as well. The original access point to the site was here, direct onto Wheaton Road. So this access point was put in when the stables were approved, because that was felt to be a lesser trafficked road, therefore a safer access point than having an access here. So there's been work to re-hedge. You can see that the hedge is now continuous across there, whereas if you went back 15 years, there was an access point there. Was that all of them?
Yeah, yes, and not a lighter on the site, but I think that explains it, because it's going to be one sort of overall group. And can I just follow up, if you don't mind, Chairman, on the piece of land to the immediate right that was part of the original equestrian centre? I'm assuming the land, the block of land has been bought in its entirety. So, is it reasonable to assume that these people will have horses and stable horses on the site as well and utilise that, because the two quite often come hand in hand?
Indeed, I think that is a reasonable assumption. It is a matter that I discussed with him. I don't think the current owner is a horse owner, but you'll see that there is an access retained even when the fences are erected to form these separate pitches. There is an access retained from the centre of the site to allow you to get into that field, and then it wouldn't be uncommon to find sort of movable field shelters and what have you dropped in there to provide a bit more comfort accommodation for any horses that were in that field. But that would typically, I can see the logic of how that would be laid out in that way.
Yeah. And the reason for asking that question is that, you know, are we likely to see another application? I know it's hindsight or looking into the future. we would potentially 6 units on a site is a reasonable size, but you wouldn't necessarily want the whole field to be converted to further pitches, because that would have a larger impact. But looking at what's in front of us here, I don't have a problem with it, and I'm happy to support it.
Yeah, sorry, I appreciate where you're coming from, Chairman. That is a discussion I've had with him and explained to him in sort of hopefully relatively clear terms about how these pitches need to be set out in a logic. The pitches that they propose on this site, clearly they could have put 15 pitches on, but they would have been really small. They could have put 3 on, it would have been really large. So we had a discussion with him about making sure that the pitch proposals sit against the need that we've identified, which they generally do, and our pitch size. There's guidance in the planning policy for traveller sites that sets out what you would expect a pitched size to be in terms of its standard of accommodation, and these are generally meeting that size. They're not all the same size, but they're generally meeting that, so that if you were to extend the site into the field next to it, that would obviously be another application, but you then run into issues like the scale of the development dominating the village, which was one of the criteria in H5 that we would then be looking at closely were we to get a future application on that.
Yes, members, I want to draw attention to the fact that obviously, and it's a really important point, that this is a material consideration, that we have a statutory obligation as a local authority between 22 and 27 to provide 4, and between 27 and 32 a further 7. So that's a material consideration. Then when you look at H5, and Andrew's been through that list, there is a big tick list there, which this site ticks on every one. It's an authorised site, it's underused. I think looking at the access, that's been looked at by Highways Authority, and you can see there are still 35 metres between the access and the junction of the road. There are kennels across. And so this particular application, I think, has a lot to commend it in terms of meeting a need that is established. And I think, you know, I'd be willing to support this, but obviously we'll continue. But I'm making the point really that I think this particular site is, I mean, I know all the parish councillors have objected to it, and I'm disappointed in that, but they have a view about access, etc. But I think access is okay there, and it's been approved by the Highway Authority. And I think in terms of it being fairly near, 700 metres, I think, from Wheaton Settlement, it's hardly in what most people would say was a remote location. That's one of the considerations, is that these sites are not remote. And clearly the thinking behind that is that they want any opportunities to integrate with the local community to be possible in terms of schooling and healthcare and everything else. So they will have access to services at Westham, etc., which is what they require. So I'm just making the point that it has a lot going for it. I'm going to bring in...
a number of others, Chairman.
Yes, very quickly. Councillor Griffiths.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I'm quite impressed by what is going to come on this site compared to what it is today. So I'm quite happy to support this application.
Councillor Goodman.
Councillor Goodman.
Thank you, Chairman. Just a bit of a clarification, actually. Andrew mentioned earlier, and quite rightly so, about these folk joining in with the local community. And you mentioned schools, and that's absolutely as it should be. My question is, or more of a clarification, is this aimed at transitory? Is that? I think I'm saying that wrong. Or is it a more permanent site for the 6 pitches, i.e. are they likely to be coming to wanting to live there? and joining the schools and everything that the villages have to
Question
offer.
to the officers.
Yep.
Okay.
Thank you.
There is reference in this, the planning policy, I can't remember the name of it myself now, I've written it down. The planning policy for traveller sites, the national guidance, talks about transit sites.
Yeah.
Whereby it's somewhere that travellers who are, gypsies and travellers who are going from A to B, drop in there for a short period as part of breaking their journey. That's not this. This is a residential site where they would have their home, and then, which is why, going back, that's not something you find in a transit site, because that's where the family live. They then take that off to go places as part of their sort of heritage and culture. And if it was a transit site, you would have a specific sort of reference to that. The pitches would be smaller, and it's more mingled in, whereas this is to be subdivided into a series of residential plots where you would typically find a lodge like that, and then caravans and another more temporary accommodation that is used as part of the culture.
Thank you. Yeah, I think I must have got that wrong in my head. So the folk who are coming to live there are going to be there for quite some time.
It's going to be their home base.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Good question.
Thank you, Chair. With historic gypsy traveller sites in the areas where I live, I'm sorry, I can't support this. They just absolutely come and annihilate the place. You've seen the travellers that annihilated Lytham Hall recently, the whole park, wherever it is, that was horrible. You go down Angel Lane, there's not 12 caravans on, there's more like 40 caravans on there this weekend. That's not 12. It's hard to control, it's hard to monitor, it's hard to get anything done once they start taking the mick. It's so difficult for the planning officers to enforce anything because they just don't take any notice. Putting another one round the corner from Angel Lane, because it's not that far away, it's a disaster. It will be a disaster for the local people, and I can understand why the parish councils are objecting, because we've had enough in our areas of the nonsense that comes along with it. And it is nonsense. And until you've lived through it, until you've seen it, until you see what happens on your doorstep, you don't appreciate how bad it can get. They go to the garages and run off without paying for the fuel. They go into the pubs, order loads and loads of food and go away without paying for the food. The cards get declined, they leave a card behind them, but it gets declined. It's a constant battle with people who live in the area. We all know where they live, we all know where they've come from, we all know who they are. And unfortunately, they get themselves barred from all these places. They're no longer allowed in any of the garages in the local area. They're no longer allowed in any of the pubs. That's not integrating into society. That's not integrating.
Yeah, I'm just going to intervene, and you're very passionate and you're making your case here. But what I would advise members is that we have to judge the application before us again, and that this is a fairly small site. It would be an authorised site, and we have to be very much aware of the planning conditions and the rules that apply to our determination of this application, and therefore, although there could be, all of us might have stories about other experiences on other sites, we cannot predetermine an application on the basis of experience on other sites. I think I'm right in saying that. And therefore, we have to confine our thoughts and our judgment here on the application. There is a statutory need that we are obliged to meet as a local authority. And will this site help to provide appropriate facilities for this site? Now, in my view, they do, and that is the determination that we have to make with respect to all the other arguments.
I think also, if I may, on the recommendations on page 53, condition 3 should hopefully address the concern about the overuse of the site.
Yeah. Okay.
If it fails to do that, then I guess that's a matter for enforcement. But we can, as you say, only go what's before us.
Okay. Thank you. Councillor Settle.
Is that me? Shut up now.
I'm sorry. If you wanted to continue.
Yeah, I do actually. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I just feel like it's right. Shut up and deal with it. I'm not happy with it, and I will stand by the parish councils, and I won't be supporting this in any way whatsoever. Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Settle.
Thank you, Chairman. Councillor Goodman actually asked my question, but there is a sort of maybe an explanatory question I could ask of either Andrew or Ian, because I don't understand this national legislation. If it's not a transitory site now and it's a permanent residential site, I don't see a difference between that and a normal residential caravan site. And the example I would give is, for example, what happens if someone who's currently on one of the sites in Frackleton decides to move there, if it's a cheaper commercial rent, and save themselves some money? Do these gypsy travellers have some sort of special ID card? Because what's to stop any other person saying to that chap, can I come on your site? And when they say, are you a gypsy traveller? Yes. Okay then. What's the difference between the gypsy traveller site, which is permanent, and the normal residential caravan site, which is permanent?
I would stand to be corrected by Andrew, but I think there'd be a condition which would limit occupation to gypsy travellers, and it would be as per any other planning permission. It would be up to the occupier, the owner of the site, to make sure that the site was operated within those parameters, i.e. that the those who are occupying it were only from the gypsy traveller community.
Yeah, just to...
Sorry, I would agree with what Ian said there. That sounds entirely reasonable. It's just, if you're relying on the owner, and the owner doesn't really care, if somebody's paying 30 quid a week whether it's a gypsy or he's not, are we meeting a requirement to have certain gypsy sites other than turning a blind eye to it?
The planning agenda, sorry, through you, Chairman. Condition 4, bottom of page 53, as I think it's just been highlighted, refers to all residents on the site being gypsy and travellers as defined in the planning policy for traveller sites. So what I'm just about to do is locate that document and read it out for you. Planning policy.
While Andrew's looking at that, can I bring Councillor Farrington in with a question, and we perhaps can move?
Yeah, just a practical question, really. Because looking through the document, if I've missed it, apologies. But what happens with utilities waste and that if they're static, if they're singular, movable caravans? What happens to waste, etc.?
If I can come, well,
there we are.
Coming back to Councillor Settle's point, condition 4 says that the site shall not be occupied by any persons other than gypsies and travellers as defined in the planning policy for travellers' sites. The planning policy for travellers' sites defines gypsies and travellers as persons of nomadic habit of life, whatever their race or origin, including such persons who on grounds only of their own or their family or dependents' educational or health needs or old age have ceased to travel temporarily or permanently, and all other persons with a cultural tradition of nomadism or of living in a caravan, but excluding members of an organised group of travelling show people or circus people travelling together as such. So essentially, it's people who declare themselves to be gypsies or travellers, are gypsies and travellers. Even if they've stopped travelling because they are too ill or too old to be able to
I understand
travel.
what it says, Andrew. It's no help whatsoever. if somebody from Frackleton turns up and says, "Are you a gypsy?" Yeah, I'm a gypsy. Fair enough. Because there's no description of a gypsy in there, what a gypsy looks like.
Yeah.
It's just if they decide that they want to say to the owner, "I'm a gypsy traveller," the owner has to say, "Fine." You can't contradict them by saying you don't look like one.
Well, I mean, that's quite often,
So-
that's the case in many aspects of life, isn't it?
So we could have various people from Frackleton moving there because it's a nice site, and then gypsies turn up and say, "There's nowhere to come. You're not meeting your legal obligation there." So it just doesn't make any sense to me. But the actual site itself I'm happy with, and the access, it's a fine site, but this legal definition doesn't help whatsoever. Anybody can call themselves a gypsy.
That doesn't mean you can say that about any ethnic or religious group.
Oh, so, I mean, I could turn up and say, "I'm a gypsy," and they say, "Well, no, you're not." I said, "Well, how do you know I'm not a gypsy? Or a traveller? I'm changing my lifestyle. I want to be a traveller." So I was voting in favour for it, but it's just, the whole legal thing is a nonsense to me.
Come back to Councillor
Yep.
point as well.
Yep, okay.
Appreciate Councillor Settle's made that point. Hopefully I've been able to answer that by reading the definition out. Turning to Councillor Farrington's point, there is part of the scheme which I didn't mention in the presentation, which includes a drainage arrangement. So you've got a drainage arrangement here. The red dotted lines are the drain runs that run from each of the pitches. I'm not sure why this one's not connected to it, but they run from each of the pitches from the mobile homes to connect to that. I'm sure there is a power connection on the site as well, and you've got this area here for sort of storing bins. There's, from my site picture, there's a it's obviously there's a Fylde Council refuse collection takes place to the existing occupier. So I'm assuming that would carry on in terms of the services for the new residents of the site, should it be developed.
When you say drainage, sorry, we're getting back into
Yeah,
this
sorry.
sort of issue.
I'm referring to foul drainage
Right,
there.
okay,
In terms of
thank you.
surface water drainage, the site's got a gravel surface, so the water will just percolate through in the same way that it does now. The siting of a relatively modest number of caravans around there wouldn't lead to any particular runoff issues.
Councillor Gardner, your name's down.
Sorry, Chairman, it is down, but I think Andrew has satisfied my question, I think.
Councillor Dixon. Come in.
Yeah, Chair, I'd just like to say, you know, there's a lot of talk here about a statutory need, yet the parish council seem to think that statutory need has already been met. You know, we're perhaps saying we've not. I would actually like to have this deferred and for us to go away and come back and say how many sites like this we have actually provided and go and do a count on some of the sites. Because if we're talking about a statutory need, if we need to provide 50 sites and we've already provided 70, then that's part of the planning decision. And whether we've got an oversupply or an undersupply, or whether some of these sites are being overused or underused, I think those are numbers that we should have as a planning committee before we make a decision on it. And forgive me, my laptop's died and my eyesight's gone, but if these are permanent dwellings, I'd just like to know, have the authorities asked for, as we would do with house building, contributions towards education and health as well? Because for me, for us not to be seeking that from a development here will be discriminatory against other developments which might be a brick-built house, for example. So, just a thought.
Can we not assume that information is correct?
I can
in
respond
terms
to that
of
if you-
needs, because that's been questioned.
Yeah, no, I'm happy to cover those 2 points. The local plan, the parish council will be referring to the local plan policy, which clearly says there is a need for so many pitches, and there was when it was put together in 2018. Time has moved on since then. and that's why, to inform the emerging local plan, or the next local plan, this updated Gypsy and Traveller accommodation assessment was undertaken last year. That involved consultants being brought in who spent considerable efforts travelling around the sites, interviewing, counting the pitches, interviewing the occupants, repeated trips, because obviously the occupants are not always there, to get robust information, which was then assessed and challenged quite a bit by Eddie Graves and the policy team, and that has given us an up-to-date position as of December 24 as to what our needs are. So whilst a reading of policy H5 of the current local plan will say there's a need for this, that need is out of date because time has moved on since 2018 when that plan was adopted, and 2016 when the GTA that it is based on was drawn up, and there is a current robust GTAA which we should use as a planning authority to define our gypsy needs moving forward. With regards infrastructure contributions, if this were a residential scheme for 5 dwellings, we would not be requesting any affordable housing, education, health accommodation, health provision contributions, because the trigger for that is a scheme of 10 dwellings. So this is being dealt with consistently to that.
Thank you.
Councillor Griffiths.
Councillor Farrington.
It's
Councillor
okay
Farrington.
now. Andrew answered. I was going to say, if you check the local plan, the information is there. Yeah.
Councillor Farrington.
Councillor Farrington.
Yeah, just a point that might not be really relevant, but I just need to make it because this point about transitory and permanent, and I think there's a blurred area when you say you revisit a site, a permanent site, and then they're not always there. Well, there is obviously a massive grey area in the middle, but in terms of an overarching joined up policy, I'd make the point it'd be useful for in situations like we had recently where we had a problem family at Revisited Lytham, that the council would have it within their powers to link to these sites and say, right, no, we have got, we've done, there are spare pitches, these are the people that manage these sites, you have to move and you have to go here because we've made provision, which sort of links in a bit to what Councillor Dixon was saying a moment ago about have we got capacity, haven't we? If we clearly have, you've done a survey, and we put more site capacity in, then I think we need to sort of make sure that families cooperate. Unfortunately, I believe from talking to people in the travelling area that it's not a homogenous set, and that there is actually, you think of all travellers coming under the same umbrella, but they don't. Some travellers dislike other travellers, and they wouldn't have them on their site. So it's difficult, but I think we need to have a clearly joined up policy, and that was a point I'm making.
I think that point has been noted, Councillor Farrington, but thank you. Councillor Evans.
Thank you for letting me come back in, Chair. I mean, I listen to colleagues' points and I understand the concerns from everybody. All I would say is if not here, then where? Because if we do have a requirement in the borough to provide space, I think I totally agree with Councillor Farrington's point and the recent problems with people who were on the road, so to speak. They would probably not be welcomed into one of these sites because their behaviour was not such that would be conducive with living in a permanent area. And I do think that there is a certain amount of self-governance in these small encampments, and so just like none of us wish to live next door to a nuisance neighbours, the person owning this site and owning this field would not want to bring in problems to his own immediate area. So we have to take a little bit of a leap of faith on that score. And I would just come back to the salient point, which is we have a legal responsibility to provide some space, and if we don't want temporary encampments in the area, then the best way to do that is to work with existing sites that we've got. And I take the point that's been raised that there should be conditions that if it is for 10 pitches, it is 10 pitches and not 15 and 20. But I do think that it ticks a lot of the boxes, and I still maintain that I would be happy on balance to support it.
Are you formally?
Yes.
You're proposing approval. Do we have a seconder? I think we. Councillor Gardner at the back. Good. Well, Councillor Gardner was very quick to second. It doesn't matter who, but you know, I would have done, but that's fine. Are there any other further comments or questions? No.
Chairman, Councillor Goodman, then I'll come in with a point if I may.
Yes, I'm so sorry, but I missed something that Andrew said, and I think it was important as a learning point. It was to do with the permanent site and how many residences, for want of a better word, were there. Did you say something about 10, that something would have to then be...
My reference to 10 was in our planning policies for contributions towards education and health and what have you.
Yeah.
If a scheme is for 10 dwellings, then that triggers the requirement for those to be provided. So that would apply here if there were 10 pitches, but there aren't. There are 5, so it doesn't.
Yeah. Thank you so much, that's really helpful.
So if this was a small cul-de-sac of properties on the edge of Wheaton of 5 properties, then we wouldn't be looking at contributions for that either.
So, Councillor
Chairman.
Evans. Oh, sorry.
Chairman,
Yeah, you want
if
to
I
come
may,
in.
thank you. Yeah, I'm thank you. Sharing Councillor Settle's concern here to do with the definition of travellers, and that what we're actually, I feel, voting for here is, to a small extent, a leap of faith. I mean, we can all go around the room and say, yes, we know what a traveller is, we can, but a lot of those things are based on, dare I say, stereotypes to an extent. Unfortunately, I think the law is unhelpful in this respect, in that it's one of these self-definitions, and we've found in other cases this is a real Pandora's box. I don't want to delay the decision, but I do have a concern that we should be sure what we're voting for and that those definitions we consider are met.
Councillor Evans has moved and Councillor Gardner has seconded that, the proposal to approve this application. All those in favour, please indicate. All those against? Any abstentions?
I abstain on the basis previously stated.
Thank you. Thank you. Can we move on to the last application, which is to do with dog walking, I believe. That's item 4.
Okay, so this...
And page 71. A varied agenda.
Right, this application relates to an area of land which is just to the west of Fleetwood Road, between the M55 and Windy Harbour. So just nearly opposite the Thistleton Junction and on the way to Singleton. Got it? It's an agricultural field and it's located in the countryside, and the proposal is a retrospective application actually relating to its use as a dog exercise field, or 2 dog exercise fields. And it needs to come to committee because of the size of the site exceeds 1 hectare. But the local parish council don't raise any objection to it. So, aerial image to show you the site. Elswick off to the right, Singleton off to the left. The access point is here, just next to where this barn is. That comes down a long track, and then you've got this field here, these 2 fields here, which are in this use. What you do see from that image is that whilst dogs bark, nobody lives there to hear them. So the site itself split into 2. Access tracks, top left-hand corner here, comes to a little parking area for field 1. track that leads to a little parking area for field 2. So this is where the access is. So this is looking towards Fleetwood Road. The junction is just where the red dot is there. This is a previous situation because it now looks like that, bottom right hand picture. So that barn's the same barn. So there's now a track being formed alongside the edge of that field, which runs from the access point, which is there in a more distant view, into, this is the first parking area, gate into field, signs about how to operate it, parking area, somewhere to tap with water, bin for rubbish, bin for dog waste, drive down to second field, fenced off from field where dogs are to stop them being agitated by cars going past. Existing landscaping that screens it from the north. Other field, some jumps in it. There's a part of it's fenced off, so you can sort of have your dog doing agility stuff without it careering off to the other side of the field. In each field there's a little shelter like this with a table, so you can sort of sit there and have your butties while you endlessly chuck the ball at the dog. Or chuck the ball away from the dog, in fact, would be more productive. You get more peace. Planning terms, it's in the countryside. There are policy support for rural uses or uses that are appropriate for a rural area. This is one. Can't have a dog field in the middle of a town. There is some loss of agricultural land. It's not best quality agricultural land. So whilst that is a negative, it's land that we feel it's not an overriding situation. Access is reasonably well established, well separated from the Fleetwood Road junction. Obviously the level of traffic is going to be relatively limited. There's parking areas, there's bins for the waste, there's no neighbours anywhere on that image, so we are recommending it for approval. The only change is that I introduced an error on the index by suggesting it needs to satisfy biodiversity net gain. It doesn't. Hello, John. The recommendation should just be to grant planning permission as agenda. No, not as agenda, just grant planning permission, please.
Thank you. Councillor Settle.
Thank you, Chairman. I think it's a lovely idea, providing they can make it profitable. Just out of interest, it might interest members to know that in Finland, the local authorities provide these dog exercise areas, taxpayers' expense. So I think we're getting off lightly if we get commercial operators to do this. So I'm very happy to propose it. Thanks.
Thank you. Andrew, sorry, could you explain a bit further why there doesn't need to be a biodiversity net gain here?
There are several. Biodiversity net gain is required where land is being taken out of providing habitat. What we've got here is there's the access track and the car park areas which were habitat, albeit agricultural land previously. There are so that triggers biodiversity net gain, but then there are exemptions from it, and one of the exemptions in the legislation is that where the application is submitted retrospectively. So because this is a retrospective application, the works have been done, that means that we are unable to pursue the biodiversity net gain requirements from the applicant in this case.
That seems quite, I mean, maybe no harm done here, but...
Yeah. It's all, yes.
Yeah, that's
yes. Yes. Planning it's one of the idiosyncrasies of planning legislation.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Councillor Goodman.
Sorry, I don't know if I've missed this. How is it monitored, looked after?
The way it operates is that you make an online booking and you are then given access to the code. So there's gates to each of the fields that have a number code to them, like you get a key safe for an Airbnb type accommodation. So that monitors the access. You'll see from this image there is a CCTV camera there that will presumably allow remote monitoring of what's going on. The site rules, or the operation rules, and emergency contacts for Harry and Jack, whoever they are provided there in case, I don't know, there's a fire or the dogs are ill or whatever it might be. So there is, I've seen a number of these arrangements, and this looks quite a professional, well set up type, putting the netting up so that dogs aren't distracted by passing vehicles is a touch that you might not find in many circumstances. The exercise run, the shelter and the picnic table, all that type of thing makes it appear as though a more professional arrangement than many others that I've come across.
Thank you, that's very helpful.
Thank you.
No other.
Any other questions, comments or thoughts? I think Councillor Settle has proposed. Do you have a seconder?
Nope.
Councillor Evans just got there. Okay. So Councillor Settle has proposed and Councillor Evans has seconded. All those in favour, please.
Unanimous.
That's unanimous. Members, thank you very much.
I wasn't going to.
No.
The appeal decision is the Brooklands one from last time that had just come in prior to the previous decision, so I covered it in that one. I appreciate time is perhaps a little tight as well.
And could I just point out, it'll affect some people and not all of you, that the wind farm meeting, because it's very blowy apparently, no, it's nothing to do with that, has been moved to the reception room. And I think we'll probably be looking at starting about 1 o'clock.
I don't know
Quarter
about that,
to.
Chairman. Everybody else...
Can we have a little break, because I think it's...
I think that needs to be negotiated with next door,
Right.
because the meeting was due to start at 12, so those people who aren't on committee, who have come to attend that meeting, have been here now for half an hour. There is fresh tea and coffee for members, although it was fresh at half an hour ago.
Well, I think we need to negotiate here with the members as well. Are you happy to go straight in? Yeah, 10-minute comfort break.
Yeah.
And then
I
we're
think
going
we need
in.
to, Chairman, because we've another
Okay.
meeting at 2
Yeah,
as well.
yeah. So thank you for your diligence and patience this morning. And we'll see some of you in the reception room in about 10 minutes.